Hey guys, and welcome back to Up to Speed with ElasticSearch. We are up to chapter 9, where we're going to be looking at backups. Perhaps first order of business is to standardize our terminology. So in ElasticSearch, we don't actually refer to backups as backups, we call them snapshots. So what's involved in creating a snapshot or a backup and then restoring it later? What do you need to do in order to get that working? You could say that there are three sort of steps. The first step is to register what Elasticsearch calls a snapshot repository, and this basically tells Elasticsearch where to save the snapshots to. So you can imagine you might be saving your snapshots to a location on disk. If so, what's the path? Or you might be saving your snapshots to some sort of cloud storage provider. So of course there'd be some additional configuration if you're doing that as well. So the repository kind of has all of that information as to where the snapshots are actually being saved. Once you've got the repository set up, you can go ahead and create the snapshot, and you can either do this in sort of an ad hoc way, where you're creating a snapshot explicitly and manually yourself by running a command. Or you can create a snapshot lifecycle management policy that will automatically create snapshots at given intervals with different configuration. And we'll look at both shortly. And of course, what good is a snapshot if you can't actually restore it? So you can, of course, restore a snapshot which will create a new index based off of the data that was in the snapshot. And we'll see that working shortly as well. So there are a few different repository types. As we mentioned, you can create a snapshot repository that will read and write to some location on disk, which is a file system repository type. Then there are other various repository types as well, but perhaps the most interesting ones are the different cloud providers which you can connect to using officially supported plugins. So that's pretty much the background. I think we can go ahead and get straight into the tasks. The first task is we want to register a file system repository under the backups directory in the same directory as your Elasticsearch installation. So before we actually do this, we need to modify the Elasticsearch config. So any directory on disk needs to be whitelisted for security reasons. So I've already got my Elasticsearch instance running and Kibana running, and I've already made this change to my configuration, which I've done beforehand basically because it can take some time to get Elasticsearch in Kibana up and running, and I don't want the video to drag on while we wait for it to boot. But I will show you where that configuration value is set. So I have my terminal pointing to my Elasticsearch installation. If I do an ls, we can see the bin folder. That's where Elasticsearch lives, or where the binary lives. And we'd like to have a backups folder here in this directory, which contains all of that stuff. In fact, we can see a backups folder here. Yeah, that's probably because I've already got the configuration done. But I'll show you where you need to go to make that configuration change to whitelist that folder. You might notice this config directory here. Let's just jump into that for a sec. And there are a few things here, but the main file that we're interested in is this elasticsearch.yaml file. So I'm going to open this up in V. This file, by the way, is most likely the file that you want to modify whenever you need to adjust any of the Elasticsearch configuration. We are probably going to need to look at this file again in the next video, where we look at cross-cluster search and cross-cluster replication. So inside of the file, there's this paths directory here, and the value that we're modifying is this path.repo setting, and we're setting it to backups. This is a relative directory. You can specify absolute directories as well, but relative directories are also supported. So after modifying this file, you'll need to reboot both the Elasticsearch instance and the Kibana instance. Since I've already done this though, we don't need to reboot anything, so I'm just going to go ahead and close this. If you do want some more information on this, by the way, you should be able to get all of that under the register a snapshot repository documentation. So with that done, I think I'm just going to close this, and we can go ahead with the tasks. So I'm just going to copy these and paste them. Perhaps as always, let's just check our indexes really quick. So we've got Shakespeare v3 and we've got Apache logs v1. Everything else is looking good. So we want to register a file system repository under that backups directory in the same directory as the Elasticsearch installation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a request to create a snapshot repository. This my_backup is a placeholder for the name of the repository. I'm going to call this something like file system snapshots. And the location, because we used a relative path in the Elasticsearch configuration earlier, the location that we specify is always going to be inside of that directory. So if I set the location to, if I set the location to snapshots, for example, then this snapshots directory should appear inside of the backups directory. So I might go ahead and save this, so it looks good. On to the next task. We want to create a manual snapshot of the Shakespeare index. So I'm going to grab the request from the create a snapshot documentation, paste this in here. We're going to replace this with the name of the repository, and we're going to replace this with the name of the snapshot. Wait for completion means that the request won't return until the snapshot has been created. So the indexes that we want to include in the snapshot, if I leave this empty, I believe it should include all indices, but we're only interested in Shakespeare at the moment. So let's use v3. We can remove this metadata. That looks good. Nice. Okay, so that looks good. Let's actually jump into the terminal, come back, and let's jump into backups. So we can see we've got this snapshots directory. That's the location that we provided earlier. And if we jump into snapshots, we can see we've got some information that was saved as a result of our manual snapshot. Okay, next task is to create a scheduled snapshot, and we're going to be using SLM policies for this. So looking at the documentation for snapshot lifecycle policies, I'm just going to copy this request and tweak it a little bit. Okay, so I think I'm actually happy with the name daily snapshots here. I am going to modify the schedule to be the 0 hour of the 0th minute of the 0th hour every day, and I think that looks good, so that it happens at midnight. The name of the repository is going to be file system snapshots, and the index that we want to create a snapshot for is going to be Apache logs v1. Okay, that looks good. Let's go ahead and save this, and we can retrieve it just to make sure that it got saved correctly. Of course, we're not going to wait to actually see this running, but it seems to have been saved successfully. So this is how you could go about creating automated snapshots. And lucky last is we want to restore the Shakespeare snapshot that we created earlier to a new index. So I'm going to look at the restore a snapshot documentation, and I'm just going to grab this request real quickly. So the indices that we want to restore in this case is Shakespeare v3. The rename pattern, I think I'm just going to leave this as this particular regular expression, which should just match everything. And we're going to basically rename the Shakespeare underscore v3 index as restored. Maybe we can just remove this part. So it should show up as restored underscore Shakespeare underscore v3. Why we need to do this rename is, of course, you can't have two indexes with the same name. And if we just did a restore without this information, we'd end up with a conflict because this Shakespeare v3 index already exists. So we need to rename it. And the rename pattern and the rename replacement are a nice way for you to configure how it gets renamed. So that looks good. I just need to replace the name of the repository and the name of the snapshot. There we go. Okay, let's run it, and we'll check our indexes again. And we can see we've got restored underscore Shakespeare underscore v3 has 10K documents, and it's in green health, so it looks good. And if I wanted to, I could even do a search on restored Shakespeare v3 search, and there we go. We're getting hits. We could write to this index since it is at the end of the day just a regular index that's been restored now. So I think that more or less wraps up snapshots. Thanks a lot for watching. Of course, any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments, and I will see you again in the next video, which is potentially the last video, where we'll look at cross-cluster search and cross-cluster replication. Thanks a lot. See you later. Bye.